Inside the opulent Caldwell Motors showroom in Beverly Hills, tension cracked through the air like static. A black woman stood her ground before a towering manager, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Why can't I buy this car?" she demanded, eyes locked on a $3 million Bugatti Chiron Supersport gleaming beneath showroom lights. The manager, Richard Langford, leaned in with a smirk carved from arrogance. "You don't qualify to own it," he snapped. "People like you don't belong here. This place is for the elite. Leave now." The room froze. Salespeople looked away. A white couple nearby smirked as Richard waved them toward the Bugatti like royalty. The woman's fists clenched at her sides, fury rising, yet she said nothing more. For now. Because she wasn't just anyone. She was Naomi Caldwell, CEO founder, the woman who built Caldwell Motors from the ground up. Today she wore plain clothes and walked in undercover, testing her own kingdom's soul. What she found? Rot, racism, a culture of exclusion. And now the war had begun. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Naomi Caldwell didn't flinch as Richard Langford's command echoed through the showroom. "Get out!" His voice was soaked in venom, but Naomi stood still, her body coiled with silent fury. She had come here undercover, hoping to spot a crack in the system. Instead, she uncovered rot buried deep within her own empire. Caldwell Motors was her creation, her dream born from nothing but grit, vision, and relentless drive. It was supposed to be a symbol of change, a luxury brand built not just on exclusivity, but on inclusion, talent, and innovation. But here, in one of her flagship showrooms, Naomi wasn't a visionary or a CEO. She was just another black woman being pushed aside. She didn't argue. She didn't protest, not yet. Instead, she walked slowly to the corner of the showroom and observed. That's when the real truth unfolded before her eyes. A well-dressed black man entered minutes later. Sharp navy suit, Rolex gleaming, confidence in every step. Before he could even approach the Bugatti, a salesman intercepted him. "Let me show you something more." "Suitable," the man said smoothly, ushering him toward a modest sedan near the back. Naomi's jaw tensed. Moments later, a young white man wandered in, wearing basketball shorts and flip-flops. His hair was a mess, and he looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. Yet Richard Langford himself greeted him with a broad grin. "Sir," Richard beamed, "welcome to Caldwell Motors. Our elite lineup is yours to explore. May I offer you a tour of our Bugatti collection?" Naomi watched it all, her pulse pounding, her blood boiling. This wasn't a fluke. It was a pattern. She stayed in the corner, arms folded, fury masked behind a composed stare. She wasn't looking at one man's ignorance. She was looking at a system, a code, a script that had been rehearsed over and over again until it became muscle memory for everyone inside these walls. A few feet away, a Latina mother inquired about a luxury SUV. She was polite, her tone soft, her questions measured. A young staffer smiled with rehearsed courtesy, then handed her a brochure for a budget crossover vehicle, not the high-end model she'd asked about. "This might be more in your price range," he said with a patronizing wink. Then came the final insult. A white couple, sunburned in cargo shorts and sneakers, entered without so much as a hello. The staff practically tripped over themselves to greet them. Champagne flutes appeared. Keys were jingled. Offers flew across the counter like confetti. Naomi's stomach turned. This wasn't about credit scores or background checks. It wasn't about product knowledge or showroom traffic. It was about color, about perception, about gatekeeping luxury and weaponizing identity to control who had access to prestige. And they were doing it in her name. She remembered the founding principle she'd written into the company's mission statement years ago. Luxury is not a privilege. It is a recognition of ambition, innovation, and excellence. How hollow those words felt now, echoing against the walls of this corrupted space. Her gaze swept the room one more time. The showroom, with its spotless marble floors and scent of fresh leather, had become a theater of discrimination. Every smile, every pitch, every sideways glance was another act in a play Naomi never meant to produce. Her empire had grown, but somewhere along the way it had been hijacked, twisted. She looked at Richard again. He was laughing with the white couple, shaking hands, utterly unaware that the woman he'd dismissed minutes ago could fire him with a single word. She didn't. Not yet. Naomi Caldwell didn't explode in anger. She plotted with clarity. She burned with purpose. This wasn't about one Bugatti. It wasn't about one manager. It was about a culture. She turned on her heel and walked out, unnoticed. But she wasn't leaving defeated. She was leaving armed. She had seen enough. The next time she entered that showroom, it wouldn't be as a mystery customer. It would be as a reckoning. Naomi Caldwell stepped out into the harsh Beverly Hills sunlight, but the heat outside was nothing compared to the fire roaring inside her. She climbed into her matte black Mercedes Maybach, a car she'd personally overseen during its design collaboration. As the door shut behind her and the world muted, she stared straight ahead, breath heavy, jaw locked. She had just watched her own dream become a weapon. The showroom was supposed to be the face of progress in an industry built on old money and exclusion. Instead, it had become a machine of quiet oppression, one that bore her name on every wall. She tapped the start button, but didn't drive. Her hands stayed still on the wheel, fingers trembling not from fear, but fury. How long had it been like this? How many showrooms across the country bore the same cancer, hidden behind luxury's polished mask? Had she been too far removed, too focused on expansion, too trusting of the men she'd hired to carry her vision? She thought of her father, a mechanic, hands always stained with grease. He used to say, "Every engine looks the same once you crack it open. What matters is who had the courage to turn the key." That lesson had fueled her climb, from nights studying engineering under flickering bulbs to her first office in a windowless garage in Compton. Caldwell Motors wasn't just a business. It was her answer to a world that said people like her didn't belong in luxury. And now, inside her empire, someone else was saying it again. She opened her phone and scrolled through the internal org chart. There he was, Richard Langford, Regional Director of Showroom Operations. He'd come with recommendations from a legacy competitor. Ivy League education, decades of sales experience, a polished resume full of buzzwords and accolades. Naomi had skimmed it once, maybe twice. She hadn't looked closer, and that was her mistake. Her eyes narrowed as she reread the title, Regional Director. That meant not just Beverly Hills, that meant New York, Miami, Chicago, all her highest grossing locations. If Richard was running this script in Beverly Hills, what kind of theater was playing out across the country? Her phone buzzed with a text. Naomi stared at it, then slowly turned the phone face down. Expansion could wait. Growth could wait. Reputation could wait. What mattered now was the soul of Caldwell Motors, and she wasn't going to fix it from a boardroom in Manhattan. She needed proof, a strategy, a plan that would not just expose the rot, but burn it out at its roots, quietly, decisively. Her mind spun like a turbocharged engine, mapping the battlefield. Cameras? Hidden mics? An internal audit? She needed someone inside, someone already drowning in the system who could give her the real story. Emails, directives, whispered orders passed down like gospel. She thought of the receptionist, young, Latina, smart eyes. She'd been watching everything, subtly flinching at Richard's words. Naomi had caught the twitch in her jaw when Richard dismissed her. It wasn't anger, it was shame. That girl knew. And maybe, just maybe, she hated what she was part of. Naomi reached into her handbag and pulled out a small black card holder. She didn't often carry business cards anymore. They were for show mostly. But she slid one from the holder, scribbled her direct number on the back, and tucked it away in her jacket. Tomorrow she'd return, not in disguise, but with a message. The first spark had been lit. She would offer the girl a choice: stay silent in a broken machine, or help destroy it from the inside. Naomi knew the risks. The media would feast on this. The board would panic. Shareholders might pull back. But she wasn't chasing comfort. She was chasing truth. And if it meant torching her reputation to rebuild something real, so be it. She adjusted her sunglasses, straightened her blazer, and pulled into traffic, her reflection glaring back at her in every window she passed. This wasn't just personal. It was systemic, and she had no intention of letting her empire become just another footnote in corporate rot. The next chapter wouldn't be written in press releases or strategic memos. It would be written in fire. The next morning, Naomi Caldwell returned to the Beverly Hills showroom, not as a mystery customer, and not yet as the CEO wielding fire, but as something in between, a quiet storm. She stepped through the gleaming glass doors with a calm that masked calculated intent. The same receptionist was at the front desk, Maria Torres, her badge slightly crooked, her posture composed but tight. Naomi caught the flicker of recognition in her eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there. Something had shifted. Maria straightened. "Welcome to Caldwell Motors," she said, her voice practiced. Naomi walked slowly toward her and smiled. No entourage, no designer bag, just presence. "I'm not here to shop today," Naomi said. She slipped a black business card across the marble desk. "But if you ever want to talk, really talk, call me." Maria glanced down at the card, then back up, her mouth opening just slightly before instinct clamped it shut. Naomi held her gaze for a moment longer before walking away, not toward the Bugatti this time, but toward the corner of the showroom, where she once stood unnoticed. She sat, and she watched. Again. Richard Langford hadn't arrived yet, which gave Naomi a front-row seat to observe the machine in motion, and what she saw only deepened the wound. A black man in a tailored pinstripe suit stepped through the door, his polished shoes gleaming. A moment of hesitation crossed the floor staff's faces, just a flicker, but then one of them peeled away, expression neutral, tone detached. "We're a bit full today," he said flatly. "You might want to check back during the week." The customer frowned. "I just want to ask about the S-Class Maybach." "Oh, that's in high demand," the salesman replied. "Not really available for test drives right now." Minutes later, a pair of young white tourists entered, visibly underdressed, wearing backpacks and flip-flops. Their enthusiasm was palpable. They didn't ask for anything, just wandered in. But the change was immediate. Two staffers approached with bright smiles and a tray of espresso shots. One handed over a brochure for the luxury fleet with a rehearsed flourish. Naomi's throat tightened. This was happening in plain sight. It wasn't about wealth or potential or even brand loyalty. It was about narrative, who they believed belonged in this space and who didn't. Their decisions were shaped by appearance, race, and silent prejudices so deeply woven they had become policy without paperwork. Naomi's eyes drifted back to Maria. The girl's hands trembled slightly as she answered phones, typed into the scheduling app, passed documents to sales staff. She wasn't a villain. Not yet. She was a cog, spinning in the direction the system dictated. But Naomi could see the war in her eyes. That meant something. At exactly 9:26 a.m., Richard Langford walked in, sharp as ever. Navy suit, red tie, expensive cologne trailing behind him. He surveyed the floor like a general checking his troops, oblivious to the time bomb seated in his showroom. When he reached the reception desk, Maria offered a tight-lipped, "Good morning," her voice barely louder than a whisper. Richard's tone snapped back with clipped command. "Call the transporter service. We've got a white couple flying in from Phoenix. They need VIP treatment. Do not waste time on random walk-ins today. Focus on the profiles." Naomi's jaw clenched. There it was again. Profiles. He didn't need to say what that meant. Everyone here knew. Profiles was code. Code for race, for class, for conformity. And Naomi had seen it in action now, not once, not twice, but over and over again. She stood up quietly. Richard didn't notice her at first. Why would he? In his eyes, she was probably still a nuisance from the day before. But when she stepped toward him, his posture shifted. Recognition flickered. He blinked. Too late. Naomi didn't stop walking, didn't say a word. She left the building just as calmly as she had entered, the thunderstorm still held in her chest, waiting. She didn't need to shout yet. The evidence was piling up. The patterns were visible. The cracks in the glass facade were widening with every shift, every insult, every smirk. And now she wasn't alone. She had a witness. Whether Maria would speak remained to be seen, but Naomi had extended the lifeline. And if that card left Maria's hand and dialed her number, the storm would begin in earnest. Naomi climbed into her car and drove toward downtown Los Angeles. But her destination wasn't a skyscraper or a meeting. It was quieter, more deliberate. She was going to start the audit herself. The empire had been built in her image. Now it was time to see how far it had strayed. Maria Torres sat behind the sleek glass reception desk of Caldwell Motors like a porcelain doll behind a bulletproof display, smiling on command, saying all the right things, and pretending she didn't see what she saw every single day. But after Naomi Caldwell's visit, after that quiet handoff of a black business card, Maria's insides hadn't stopped trembling. She'd barely glanced at the name at the time, afraid someone would notice her hesitating. But later, in the privacy of her tiny apartment in East LA, she flipped the card over and read the name that stopped her breath. Naomi Caldwell. No title, just a name and a private number. She knew that name. Everyone did. Naomi Caldwell was the founder, the powerhouse, the face of the empire, the woman who had risen from nothing to become one of the only black women running a billion-dollar car company. Maria had seen her TED Talk, had cried watching her interview on Forbes Women. She had idolized her. And just yesterday, Maria had sat there like a coward while her manager humiliated that woman, her hero, and told her she didn't belong. Maria hadn't said a word. She hadn't flinched. Not because she agreed, because she was terrified. Rent was due in 4 days. Her mother's hospital bill was growing like mold in the inbox. The job at Caldwell Motors was more than a paycheck. It was her lifeline. And yet, with every hour she spent behind that desk, something inside her cracked. It had started small. A comment here, a shift there. Profile fast, Richard Langford had barked at her during her first week. Don't waste time on the wrong ones. At first, Maria didn't understand. She thought he meant people without appointments or test drives. But then she saw what wrong ones meant. The man who made 6 figures but wore sneakers. The woman with an accent asking about a Bentley. The black couple dressed elegantly who were shown brochures for entry-level models, while the unshaven white guy in a flannel shirt got a personal tour of the Bugatti wing. It was a pattern, it was policy, unwritten but religiously enforced. Maria had tried to rationalize it. She was just a receptionist, right? She didn't make the rules. She didn't say the words. She wasn't the one turning people away. But her silence had made her an accessory. She began to notice her own patterns, how she hesitated before greeting certain customers, how she waited for Richard's nod before offering coffee, how she'd smile tightly when he made comments she didn't agree with, but didn't dare question. And now Naomi Caldwell had looked her straight in the eyes and handed her a lifeline. Maria clutched the card in her hand that night like it was radioactive. She didn't call, not yet, but she couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the sirens beyond her cracked window, staring at the ceiling fans spinning like her thoughts. She thought about her little brother, 13, already being watched like a threat at school. She thought about her father, deported for a traffic violation. She thought about the lies she lived every day inside that showroom. The next morning, she went in early. She opened her inbox, she scrolled back, and found them. Internal memos from Richard. Some direct, some vague. Focus on high-value buyers. Be selective, image matters. One in particular stood out. Avoid wasting energy on low-profile walk-ins. Look at the shoes before the handshake. Maria's stomach turned. She realized she had proof. Hard evidence that the discrimination wasn't imagined. It had been codified, layered in dog whistles and corporate euphemisms. She opened a blank email, addressed it to Naomi's private inbox, then hesitated. What if this ruined her? What if Richard found out? What if she never worked again? She clicked away from the email, stared at the wall, then back to the card. Naomi had walked in alone, taken the hit, watched it unfold, and still returned not to punish, but to connect. Maria knew what courage looked like now, and she knew fear had run her life long enough. She returned to the blank email, attached the files, then wrote one line, "It's worse than you think, and I have more." Her finger hovered, then she clicked send. A slow exhale escaped her lungs. She looked around the showroom, the glass, the gloss, the golden lies, and realized something had shifted. Maybe no one else knew it yet, but she did. The silence had been broken. Maria Torres waited all day for a response. Her stomach knotted so tightly she could barely breathe. The emails had gone through. She double-checked the outbox 5 times before deleting the sent messages, clearing her trash, scrubbing any trace. But still, she felt exposed. Like any second, Richard Langford would barge in, phone in hand, eyes full of fire, demanding to know what she'd done. He didn't. In fact, the day dragged on in eerie normalcy. Richard strolled in late, barked a few orders, shook hands with a wealthy real estate investor from Scottsdale, and didn't give Maria more than a passing glance. But that only made the dread worse. She couldn't eat, couldn't concentrate. Every time her phone buzzed, her pulse spiked. Then, finally, at 9:07 p.m., just as she was closing up the front desk and preparing to head home, her phone lit up. Unknown number. Her heart thundered. Hands trembling, she answered. "Maria," said a voice, soft but firm. "It's Naomi Caldwell." The world around Maria seemed to vanish. The polished floor, the show cars, the hum of the closing systems, all of it fell silent. "I got your email," Naomi continued. "I've read the memos. You were right. It's worse than I thought." Maria's voice cracked. I, I didn't know what else to do." "You did exactly what needed to be done," Naomi replied, her tone sharpening like a blade. "Now we move forward." Maria slumped into the receptionist chair, her knees too weak to stand. "You don't understand. If he finds out I leaked those files, I'm done. He'll destroy me." There was a pause, then Naomi said with unshakable calm, "He won't. I'm going to protect you." Maria's eyes stung. "How?" "Because starting tomorrow," Naomi said, "you're not just a receptionist. You're a witness, and witnesses don't stand alone." Silence hung between them, thick, heavy, sacred. Then Naomi continued, "I need you to keep documenting everything. Every memo, every phrase, every time he redirects a customer or whispers code. I want names, dates, patterns. You've already pulled back the curtain. Now we tear it down." Maria swallowed. "Okay, I'll try." "No," Naomi said. "You'll succeed." They arranged a secure way to communicate, a private encrypted email server Naomi's legal team had prepared for internal whistleblowers. Maria would upload what she found nightly. No more texts, no names spoken aloud. They would keep it airtight. Maria hung up the call and sat in the darkened showroom long after the last lights shut off, the glow of street lamps casting shadows across the marble floor. For the first time in months, she didn't feel powerless. She felt dangerous. Naomi, meanwhile, was already planning the next move. She was in her Manhattan office, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Hudson River. Her assistant had long gone home, and the only sound was the hum of the city below. She stood by the window, reading every line Maria had sent. Each memo felt like a slap, not just because of what they said, but because she'd let it happen under her name. Her company, her legacy, had been hijacked. She thought about her first showroom, a tiny leased space in South Central LA with 3 demo cars and no inventory. She'd sold her own jewelry to fund the launch. She remembered sleeping in her office during the early years. Now, here she was, presiding over an empire, and discovering that empire had grown fangs behind her back. She pulled up the internal contact list for corporate communications, then paused. No leaks, no early explosions. Not yet. She needed more than righteous anger. She needed an airtight case, one that would bring down Richard Langford without giving the board a single crack to defend him. So she called her general counsel. "I need a forensic audit on Beverly Hills, Chicago, and Miami," she said coldly. "Every sales report, customer survey, and incident record for the past 18 months. I want it yesterday." The voice on the other end hesitated. "That'll raise flags." "Good," Naomi snapped. "Let them sweat." She ended the call, turned out the lights, and stared at her reflection in the window. She didn't look like a CEO. She looked like a soldier. And this was war. By the end of the week, the rot was no longer speculation. Naomi Caldwell sat in a locked war room with her legal team, her chief of internal affairs, and her newly appointed ethics officer, someone she handpicked from outside the auto industry, someone unafraid to scorch earth. On the massive screen at the end of the room glowed hundreds of documents, emails, performance reviews, sales scripts. Maria Torres had been methodical, uploading files daily with timestamps, annotations, and full context. Each memo from Richard Langford was a nail in his professional coffin. Some messages were subtle. Let's tailor our energy toward profile-aligned guests. Others were blatant. Refrain from offering high-tier models to underqualified walk-ins. Image is everything. But one email stood out. A direct message Richard had sent to all Beverly Hills managers after a visit from a black celebrity who left without purchasing. This is a place of refinement. We're not a showroom for every Netflix B-lister with cash. Let's stay focused on our real clientele. That line broke something in Naomi. Her fingers dug into the table edge. We're going public, she said. I don't care if it tanks stock prices. I'd rather lose everything than let this slide. Her general counsel raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? The board's already tense. Half of them are wondering why you're not letting this get buried quietly. Naomi turned slowly to face him. Because this isn't a PR issue. This is a betrayal of me, of our customers, of what Caldwell Motors was meant to stand for. If they don't see that, they're welcome to resign. Silence followed. No one challenged her again. Across the country, Maria Torres was living a quieter revolution. She still showed up to the showroom every day, still wore the beige blazer and the nervous smile, still handed brochures to potential buyers. But now every interaction had purpose. Every careless remark Richard made, every slight redirect, every whispered instruction. She recorded it all, building the record that Naomi would need to level the house. She'd stopped fearing him. She'd started studying him. Maria noticed how Richard only used his corporate voice with white clients, his tone softening, words dripping with performative charm. She noticed how he switched tactics with customers of color, shortening his sentences, hardening his posture, assuming ignorance until proven otherwise. She saw how he undermined junior staff who pushed back. She caught him once dismissing a black sales associate's customer with a wave. Don't waste time on pity sales, Jason. Focus on the ones that keep the lights on. Maria's hand clenched under the desk as she typed those words into her encrypted app. That night, she uploaded the audio file. Naomi received it during a red-eye flight back from Chicago, where she just completed another unannounced visit to one of her flagships. It was the same story there. Salesmen ignoring black customers, steering Latino families toward lesser models, handing out champagne to every white couple who walked through the door. It wasn't one showroom. It was a pattern, a culture, a poison. By the time Naomi landed in New York, she knew the plan. The war would unfold in 3 phases. Expose the truth. Let the board hear Richard's words. Let the public see what the company had become. Empower the brave. Announce sweeping internal reforms. Introduce a whistleblower protection system and promote Maria, not just as a survivor of the rot, but as part of the cure. Rebuild with fire. Tear down the old systems. Fire the complicit. Create a new Caldwell Motors, one rooted in dignity, not division. But before any of that, she needed a moment. One more with Maria. Naomi called her on a quiet Friday night. I'm ready, Naomi said. Maria's voice was steadier than it had ever been. So am I. I want to fly you to New York, Monday morning. I'm bringing this to the board. You're going to be in the room. Maria hesitated. Me? Yes, you've earned it. But I'm just a receptionist. No, Naomi said. You're the reason this company still has a chance. Maria didn't cry. She didn't stutter. She just nodded, even though Naomi couldn't see it. Okay, she whispered. Let's burn it down. The boardroom at Caldwell Motors' Manhattan headquarters had never been silent for this long. 15 directors sat in high-backed leather chairs around the glass-topped table, flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered sweeping views of the New York skyline. But no one looked outside. Their eyes were fixed on the screen at the front of the room, where Naomi Caldwell stood, remote in hand, shoulders squared like a general before a firing squad. She clicked. The first email appeared. Richard Langford's name at the top, his words below. Refrain from engaging with walk-ins who don't match our visual brand standard. Use your judgment. No need to explain decisions. Gasps. Naomi clicked again. Another email, this time the tone more brazen. Focus on customers with elite visual cues. If they don't look the part, they're not buying. Time is money. A board member shifted in his seat. Another tapped his pen anxiously. Richard Langford sat stone-faced at the end of the table, arms crossed, jaw rigid. Naomi turned to face him. "Do you deny writing those?" she asked, her voice calm but razor-edged. Richard leaned forward, his voice oily. "You're taking phrases out of context. You know how sales works, Naomi. We streamline based on efficiency. Visual cues are standard practice." Naomi's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You mean racial profiling is standard practice?" "That's not what I said, but it's what you meant." She turned back to the board. "I built this company on the belief that luxury doesn't have to mean exclusion. I believed in merit, in vision, in creating space where ambition, not skin color, decided your place. But under his leadership, our showrooms have become filters for whiteness, and I will not let that stand." She clicked again. A video began to play. Security footage. Beverly Hills showroom. Naomi herself, incognito, standing by the Bugatti. Richard's voice, crystal clear. "This place isn't for people like you." The room erupted. Murmurs, stifled curses. Someone muttered, "Jesus Christ." Jonathan Fields, the silver-haired board chair, cleared his throat. "Naomi, this is serious, but is it isolated?" Naomi didn't respond. She nodded toward the door. Maria Torres stepped in. She looked small at first, a blazer a size too big, her hair pulled back tightly, eyes wide. But she walked with purpose. She sat beside Naomi, opened a folder, and slid it toward the board. "I worked under Richard for 2 years," Maria said, her voice shaking only slightly. "He trained us to profile, not overtly, but in code. Phrases like high-value profiles, appearance-based filtering, don't waste time on the wrong ones." I started recording everything 2 weeks ago. She clicked a small device. Richard's voice filled the room. "Don't let them test drive if they look like they're renting for Instagram. You know what I mean. Stay sharp." The silence that followed was suffocating. Richard exploded. "This is a witch hunt. You're dragging a company through the mud because you've got a chip on your shoulder." "Sit down," Naomi snapped, turning on him. Her voice cracked like thunder. "You stood in my showroom and told me I didn't belong. You didn't recognize me, and that's fine. But you looked at me and decided, in 3 seconds, that I was unworthy of standing next to a car I designed. You didn't fail the brand. You betrayed it." Richard stood, fists clenched. "This is insane. I made that Beverly Hills location the highest-grossing showroom in the country." "At what cost?" Naomi shot back. "Exclusion? Humiliation? You built numbers on the backs of people we're supposed to uplift?" Jonathan stood slowly. "We've heard enough." He looked around the table. "This board is here to protect the integrity of Caldwell Motors. If we allow this kind of culture to stand, we're complicit." He turned to the group. "All in favor of terminating Richard Langford, effective immediately?" Hands rose. Naomi watched each one. 11 hands, 4 did not move. Jonathan looked at Richard. "You're dismissed." Richard's face went pale. "You can't do this. I built that showroom. I put us on the map." Naomi stared him down. "You built a facade. I'm tearing it down." Security entered the room. Richard backed away, sputtering curses before the door slammed behind him. Maria sat frozen, chest heaving, eyes blinking fast. Naomi turned to her. "You did it. You brought it down." Maria whispered, "What happens now?" Naomi looked out at the skyline. "Now," she said, voice steeled with purpose, "we rebuild from the ground up." It started as a ripple. The headline broke on a quiet Monday morning, just hours after Richard Langford was escorted out of Caldwell Motors' Manhattan headquarters. Former employee leaks damning evidence of racial bias inside luxury car giant. Maria Torres' name wasn't listed in the article. Naomi had insisted on shielding her identity until the storm passed. But her recordings were there. The emails, the policies, the videos. All of it laid bare before the world. Within minutes, Twitter caught fire. Caldwell exposed. Justice in the showroom. Luxury for all. By noon, mainstream media had picked it up. CNN, Bloomberg, NBC. The story wasn't just about one bad manager. It was about a systemic bias operating within one of the country's most respected luxury brands. And the fact that the CEO herself had gone undercover to expose it, that sent it into viral orbit. Talk shows ran segments dissecting the footage. TikTokers reenacted the confrontation between Richard and Naomi. Influencers who had once proudly flaunted Caldwell vehicles now posted stories of regret, some revealing their own uncomfortable experiences at showrooms across the country. By the end of the day, Naomi Caldwell was the most searched name on Google, but it wasn't a victory lap. Inside her office, Naomi stood stone-faced as she reviewed the tidal wave of public response. Support flooded in. Yes, thousands of customers, activists, and even competitors commended her stand. But so did doubt. So did fear. Share prices took a hit. Investors panicked. PR teams scrambled. Her assistant knocked. "It's Porsche," the assistant said. "Their exec team wants to schedule a joint statement on diversity. They're in damage control mode." "Tell them no," Naomi replied without looking up. Another knock, this time legal. "Naomi, Ferrari's putting out a vague apology about showroom culture gaps. You're pressuring the whole industry. Are you ready for that kind of fight?" Naomi closed her laptop slowly. "We're not pressuring anyone. We're just refusing to lie anymore." Behind her, a wall-sized monitor played the now iconic video from the boardroom. Maria's trembling voice, Richard's face contorting in denial, Naomi's words like hammer strikes. "I built this company on the belief that luxury doesn't have to mean exclusion." That sentence had become a rallying cry. Naomi turned to the internal HR lead. "Begin phase 2. Launch the internal audit across all locations, every showroom, every region." The HR executive paled. "That's hundreds of people." "Then start yesterday," Naomi said. "Every manager, every memo, every sales training manual. I want it all." She wasn't done. The next press conference was scheduled for Thursday. Naomi stood before a sea of flashing cameras and asked the world not for applause, but accountability. "This is not just our shame," she said, her voice calm, unwavering. "It's an industry sickness, and we will root it out, not with slogans or statements, but with policy, transparency, and action." Reporters hurled questions. "Will other executives be terminated?" "Yes." "Are you worried about lawsuits?" "I'm worried about the ones who never got to buy the car because someone decided they didn't belong." "Do you think this will hurt sales?" Naomi looked directly into the camera. "If doing the right thing costs us profit, we were never a real brand to begin with." By the time she returned to the office, her phone had 5 voicemails from civil rights groups, 3 from legal scholars offering amicus briefs, and 2 from rival CEOs asking for private meetings. But the message that mattered most came from a black couple in Atlanta, a selfie smiling in front of their new Bentley. Captioned, "We walked into Caldwell, Atlanta today. No one looked twice. They offered us a test drive. For the first time, we felt seen." Naomi forwarded the image to Maria. Maria, who now stood at the center of the revolution, freshly appointed as Caldwell's new training supervisor of customer equity. Her role? To retrain every showroom employee, starting with Beverly Hills. Her first action? Rip out every outdated sales script. Her second? Rewrite them all, grounded in respect and merit. On her first day in the new role, Maria stood in the exact spot where she used to hand out brochures under Richard's watch. This time she was holding a clipboard, speaking to a group of 10 nervous staffers. "We're not here to memorize scripts anymore," she said. "We're here to unlearn everything we were told to ignore." Someone raised a hand. "Why you?" Maria smiled. "Because I kept my mouth shut too long, and now I won't be quiet again." Outside the glass doors, customers strolled in. No one was profiled. No one was steered away. For the first time, Caldwell Motors was becoming the place Naomi always imagined. And the industry. It was on notice. Naomi Caldwell stood on the rooftop of Caldwell Motors headquarters, the Manhattan skyline ablaze with the soft glow of dusk behind her. She wore no makeup. No press team flanked her. No teleprompters. Just the wind brushing against her blazer and the weight of everything she'd fought to dismantle still pressing on her shoulders. The revolution she sparked had scorched more than Richard Langford. It had torched illusions about merit, about fairness, about the blind spots hiding behind polished glass and luxury brochures. Caldwell Motors wasn't just a car company anymore. It was a battlefield, and now it had a soul. Below her in the executive boardroom, final votes were being cast. An entire restructuring plan, internal audits every quarter, diversity and equity training developed by experts, not PR firms, a whistleblower protection fund, anonymous reporting channels, and most critically, an employee-led equity council with real power. Maria Torres sat on that council's first chair. She had traded her receptionist badge for a voice, and she used it. Across Caldwell showrooms from Miami to Denver to Seattle, things were changing. Customers who once braced for subtle rejection now found warmth, curiosity, and honest service. Staff who once feared deviating from the profile model were now trained to listen, to ask, and to treat everyone like a potential VIP, because anyone could be. Sales had dipped in the early days, as scandals tend to sting. But Naomi didn't flinch. She invested in the long game. Customers returned, some because they believed in the change, others because they finally felt welcomed. Influencers stopped asking for free vehicles and started praising the brand's integrity. Caldwell's flagship commercial, a montage of real customers, of all colors and backgrounds, test driving their dream cars, went viral not for flash, but for truth. In one scene, a young black girl touched the steering wheel of a Bugatti and whispered, "One day, this is mine." The commercial didn't add a voiceover. It didn't need to. The industry took note. Porsche launched its own internal equity review. BMW pledged $10 million to minority entrepreneurship initiatives. And Ferrari's CEO publicly credited Naomi Caldwell for holding up a mirror we could no longer look away from. But not everyone applauded. Some investors grumbled. Some elite clients defected. One emailed Naomi directly, "I don't go to showrooms to be preached at." Naomi replied in 3 words, "Then shop elsewhere." She never blinked, because she remembered her roots. She remembered her father's grease-stained hands, his busted toolbox, the way he used to point at passing cars and say, "Imagine building something like that." She remembered being 17, laughed out of her college advisor's office for listing automotive CEO as her dream. She remembered being 28, denied a business loan by a banker who smiled too hard and told her she should consider a boutique instead. And she remembered, most of all, the look on Richard Langford's face the moment he realized the woman he tried to throw out was the one who signed his checks. This war hadn't been about revenge. It had been about redemption, about waking up the giant she'd unknowingly allowed to fall asleep. Now the monster was gone, and in its place something better was rising. Maria joined her on the rooftop. Her blazer was pressed, her expression calm, but her eyes gleamed with purpose. "They're ready," she said softly. Naomi turned to face her. "You did well." "We both did." Naomi looked down over the city, then back at her. "We're not done." Maria nodded. "I know." They stood in silence as the last light faded behind the skyline. Downstairs, a new chapter of Caldwell Motors had already begun. One where luxury wasn't about exclusion. One where power didn't hide behind prejudice. One where voices like Maria's were no longer whispers but megaphones. The story had started with silence, a cold rejection, a quiet humiliation. But it ended in fire, in rebirth, in a promise fulfilled. To every woman who'd been told you don't belong. To every customer who'd been judged before they spoke. To every staff member too afraid to question the rules. Naomi Caldwell didn't just rebuild her empire. She redefined what power looks like. And this time, it looked like justice. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching and see you next time.